I'll see if we can look at this Axe game and talk about things that that Arg can do that make Rook really sad. And the thing that one of the really critical points about this matchup that makes it really bad for Rook is that Rook's like jumping mix-up is a really big part of his kit. And I think we saw with Graves matches the way that Chavez is switched to using neutral A not just to poke but to block Rook's attempts to jump over him and punish. Like that way of playing that Chavez is using helps block how good Rook's jump in mix-up is. Argagarg's similar, but Argagarg doesn't have to risk anything by getting close to do it. Oh yeah, quick point of clarification. There's some talk in the chat about when projectiles cross up. So cross-ups are entirely dependent on opponent's positioning relative to you in this game. So if if a projectile ends up behind-ish you, but your opponent's in front, you block away from your opponent every time. That's the only rule. Projectiles, however, because they're active and they're always moving in like a certain direction at a certain speed, you can put projectiles on the field and then jump over your opponent to create powerful mix-up situations. But the cross-up in those situations comes from the opponent moving around you and the active projectile bonking them at a certain time. Val's Rainbow Disc is a great example. If Rainbow Disc is hitting the opponent over and over again, Valerie can jump over you to try and make you mistime your swap in blocking. Anyway, enough about cross-ups or not cross-ups. So, Rook's jump-in is really weak in this matchup, or it can be. So, Rook getting knockdowns is really good. Oh, this is a fun thing. Not to get... It's all going to be scatterbrained anyway. Poison is pretty good against Rook, I think. Not in all situations. I think X uses it in a couple spots that are pretty dangerous and get, like, our downside actively. But, like, this one is an okay one if it hits. Thing is Rook can actually use forward jump A, that momentum stall, like the stuff that I used to dodge Graves neutral A. Right when would get hit by Poison Fish, you have to forward jump A and get just past it. So it's a little tight, but I think it's pretty valuable for Rook to be able to get around Poison Fish in that way. At closer spacings, you can't do that so much because Arg can neutral A you out of the air as a counter hit, and then bonk you on the other end of the screen for 2, and then you're reset. So it's pretty bad. But worth noting. Oh, that was really bad. So this was intended to be a earthquake into jumping into landslide, and I just mashed out B for no reason. So there's me going over Poison Fish again. You get a knockdown because the opponent did forward A. You do bubble shield. You have to 3-way guessing game. Get the knockdown. When Jube's playing Arg, Jube has certain sequences, the sequence of, unfortunate trade. Sequences of zoning pressure that he uses to keep Rook walled out. Having Wave on the field and Goldfish on deck is really valuable because Jube will create a situation where you want to jump over a fish in a certain way to make forward progress, because otherwise you're going to stay at full screen. And then he'll throw a blue fish at a spacing where you're going to land on it because you jumped onto it. And if you do something like vines, you'll end up getting blocked, which means you get stuck in a spot where the correct answer is... Oh, there's a good example. So, forward A is good. This would get over it, but neutral A... Oh, I'm out. Bonks Rook out of it. Gets the purple fish. So... Super's okay, but being ready to respond to earthquake and things is important. Arg wants to be doing drill all the time, all that stuff. Things like that you never want to have happen. This is at like a normal level of Rook and Arg play. This situation with Bluefish is a really standard mix-up idea, I think. Rook is close to Arg, not quite in range where a splash is necessarily going to hit, but it's in that threatening range. There's a blue fish here. Rook jumps over it. So in this situation, Arg can neutral A, which works every time if Rook doesn't have super, basically. If Rook has super, they can threaten that. Rook can also do a forward jump A as early as possible and trade 1-for-1, which isn't actually correct to do in this situation. So this was actually just a losing jump that I did in this situation. Which is unfortunate, because if you're Rook and you're on the ground and you see this blue fish coming, maybe you can clap it. That's a pretty good result. If you block it, you're going to block another forward A into like a cancel into wave, ground C. Then you're going to get pushed back again, and there's a goldfish out, and it lets Arg set up bluefish. And maybe you clap the bluefish, but then Arg's got super and has a chip out. So this is the stuff that's hard. You want to look for like a situation where you can like clap the bluefish and not get counter poked by forward A, which doesn't really happen at 1 HP. Stuff. This was a very nice earthquake. Normally these things end up landing on the fish, which is unfortunate. But Axe lets me in. Whenever you're playing as Rook 2, you have to guesstimate when the Arg is willing to use Bubble Shield. The more confident the Arg is in their zoning, I feel, the more comfortable they'll get with just holding it and not using it and letting Rook give up pokey. Because Rook can't afford to not guess. It's really rough. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Whenever Rook flips out like that, there's definitely danger in picking things that aren't like jump away. Just the way it goes. So there's me doing more of the really questionable spacing of jump-ins. Those are the kind of things that Jubei bunks every time. Or Jube, sorry. I take this, but I get the meaty landslide. Axe is being nice and disciplined about not throwing my meaty landslides. I should have given up on them at some point. But... oh, this is unfortunate too. So the other thing is Rook really needs to ground super these drills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Like, reactable? Very questionable. A higher drill definitely can be. So it depends. But if you're Rook and you know the opponent has a tendency to do it, you want to look for the jumps where they're going to try and get it and be ready to super. But Arg's jump back A is really strong against a lot of stuff Rook would do. Like the grabs and things that beat drill lose to forward jump or back jump A. Landslide can perform pretty well too though. That was a nice example. There's the trade that I was talking about. It's an okay interaction for Rook, but it doesn't work so well. I don't know. It's one of those things that it leaves Rook at a screen position that isn't super favorable, so you have to take that trade sometimes, but yeah, that one wasn't quite meaty. When you're doing that whole setup thing, don't do it on an Arg that is meter. If they know what they're doing against it, they'll bubble shield and then throw you. 1, 2... oh, it was because I pressed a button. It was a good setup. That's too bad. I thought I walked a little too long, which is why I think I ended up pressing something. But, nah, it's just me making a mistake. Well, not just making a mistake, but good call on Axe for, like, I say mistake. When you do meaty landslide, part of the upside of it is sometimes when you do meaty landslide, you do things that aren't Yomi, and you punish the opponent as a result. So that was me guessing that Axe goes for like something punishable, and Axe was disciplined and got the good throw. So this is good stuff. So the other thing is Arg's neutral A hits Rook from basically screen start position. It's one of those things that I would like it to be reactable in some way. That would be super duper cool. I'm really bad at it. I don't know if bad's quite the right term. I'm not consistent at it, and I think being consistent at it would be like a great boon in the matchup, like making it... it still would be really bad if you could react every time. But anyway, so Rook has to do back A, at these ranges, it pulls him back just a little bit and lets him bonk Arg for it. Unfortunately, you don't get any reward more than a point of damage in most cases. If you counter hit and you confirm the counter hit, you can get 3 by comboing to landslide. But Thunderclap worked out okay there. Good call that I would want to walk over it. As Rook, what you want to do is you have to do a late splash anyway to get over Purple Fish. So when you've got super, you want to react to this what am I doing? You want to react to this thing back here. You see this? This is the keyframe you want to watch for. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, just a 13 frame now. It's not realistic, so you want to guess, I guess, if the neutral A is going to come out. And you want to burn your super. If you super Arg's neutral A, then you get really paid off, and it's great. But if Arg has meter, then you still have to play the guessing game against the strongest reversal against your whole kit, which is sad. Yeah, clap to landslide is generally a bad idea. For similar reasons to what happened there, like that one I didn't really get punished for, but Arg can back jump A and then cancel it into bubble. If you go through a fish, just a back jump A does the trick. It was good. Well played by Axe, by the way. Me moaning about some of the things I regret in the matchup, interactions that I don't play around properly. That's me wishing I was better at some stuff, but that doesn't take away from playing like decisions properly, making the neutral A's when Rook's not gonna super, making the right calls. That's what it's all about. It's good stuff. But yeah, that matchup's really hard. I think that it'd be nice to... It's one of those, I guess, the more that you run it, the better you'll get at it. But I don't know how it'll go long term. Actually, I know. It's going to be bad. As long as... If Rook got a knockdown for calling out a neutral A with this back A, like if you could get the C cancel consistently, then I think the matchups has like a lot of unfavorable qualities for Rook, but Rook can play around that spacing and try to get Arg to let him in. You know, maybe I've got some special complaining tech I can share. But yeah, I think that's the tricky part, is that Rook's making guesses on like a continuous range of time, I think. Which is a weird way to say things. I'm not sure it's very clear what I mean. But when you enter a mix-up, like, I don't know, like after you block something of Rook's, it's this discrete moment where Rook's +3 and has these options, and the opponent has different defensive options, and we're trying to play this rock, paper, scissors game of knowing what the other person's going to do. So in those situations, they're like a fixed point in time guessing game. And Rook tends to be very strong in those because his payoffs are so good. What keeps Rook in check and what keeps him balanced, I think, is that against most characters, he has to take initiative in continuous time guessing games. Things like whenever I'm playing against Chavez and I decide to jump because I want to punish him doing something on the ground, I'm not picking the time to jump like you pick to Yomi and a tick throw. You pick to jump because you have a feeling or a guess that the opponent's not going to let you keep walking at them. And in a continuous time range guessing game, like the ones we're talking about here, if I was right about one point in time, if your grappler is or whatever, Rook gets it right, then it's pretty advantaged for them. You jump over their fireball, you punish them with a knockdown, and you maybe win the round or whatever. If you guess wrong in a continuous range guessing game, it's far more likely to guess wrong than it is to guess right, I think, in general. So there's 100 possible values. You pick one of them, and they pick one of them, and if they match, you get it right. And if they don't match, then they got it right. So continuous range guessing games don't favor the person who needs them to match, which is usually what what Rook's doing in neutral. What Argagarg does is he creates a lot of continuous time guessing games, ones where Rook has to make 2 points match, and you have to win several of those to get to a point where you're playing your fixed time guessing games. And even in those fixed time guessing games, fixed point of time, I guess, Argagarg has that bubble shield super, which is a really strong option. It outright wins if Rook did something, and if Rook didn't do something, Rook has to win another guessing game. So that feature of what Argagarg does isn't like unique to Rook. Bubble Shield's always going to be a strong super, and it really helps shore up defense that would otherwise be pretty painful for Argagarg to deal with. But when you're thinking about what makes a matchup easy or hard for a grappler type, I guess, the more continuous time range guessing games you have to play, the more health you're going to spend. And when those guessing games don't create winning chances, then you're playing a difficult matchup probably.